So, folks, I'm here with Faye the ENFJ. She's got her own good YouTube channel. And we're going to try out this new feature. And I'm going to play this old video of mine where I was on my own talking about ENFJ. And Faye, every now and then, she'll go, right, stop right there, Ben, and let me have a comment on what you've just said. We can sort of do it like that. So using this new feature, folks, I'm going to play this.
I'll be like.
Yep. Yeah, there's a slight delay, but we're going to work around this. We already have 3 viewers. Here we go.
Hi, folks.
Oh, wow. All right.
This is ENFJ, Model G. So first few things about ENFJ overall. EJ mindset. So extroverted judger. So this is linear assertive in SOCIONICS. So the EJs are the ones that lead with TE and FE. So a powerful extroverted judging function. Also NF, also beta quadra. Now beta quadra is a different kind of FE from alpha quadra, because in the beta quadra you have FE with SE. So this has a bit more of a harder edge than when the alpha quadra with the SFJs, where they have FE with SI. And the MBTI sort of definition of FE sort of leans towards FE with SI. This is more, with the FE with the SE, this is more about charisma and raising emotions in other people. Think of the charismatic leaders that can use their followers' emotions. So this block here, so I'm going to do this block by block. This social mission block, this is like the Kersey role variant. For these two, as you'll notice, these are the ego functions in SOCIONICS and the lead and auxiliary functions in MBTI.
Yes. Awkward delay, folks. Yes, Faye. That's a long delay.
Oh, wow, the delay. I was going to say, do you find that beta NFJs, that's a long delay. Yeah. Do you find that beta NFJs with conflict aversion mimic alpha FE more?
I would think so. I would think that, just to repeat, so that because there's going to be a delay, folks, I think that, so for instance, Faye here has a 9 in her tri-type, and so she's going to be less stereotypically like the E.I.E. cult leader. The delay has been sort of, that delay has sort of reduced a bit. So, yeah, basically. But that's my bias. It's like, yeah, the 9 fix is going to make the FE nicer from my point of view. Yeah, I was just seeing a comment. I am Mr. Panda. Okay. Any other comments before I play it? Okay.
No, continue.
Okay. Yes, mistress.
Maximum energy, more than is actually necessary. Actually can be self-indulged. This is in the externalities row, so this is directed towards society. The NE, this is like basically the ENFJ fish swims in NE and doesn't realize it's wet with NE, because to them, and I'll explain in a moment when I go through the bullet points for NE. In fact, so this is used as a tool for this. So in ESFP, they use extroverted feelings to draw attention upon themselves. So I'll go over that bit in a moment. So optimum energy, just enough. So used as a tool for this and this for the social mission. And so you'll see, right, so FE minus, sensitive to others' emotional state, control over content they convey, and inspirational. So let's see how they might use NE with that to aid in that. So using NE as a tool, encourage new ideas or come up with themselves. Combine sources within a pioneer project, searches and finds new talents within itself. So these new ideas and things, these would probably be useful when ENFJ is in the role variant of teacher, mentor, teacher, and so finding new ways to explain things. Next block, social adaptation block. So not got as much energy for this, so minimum and pessimum. So, and this is very sensitive. I'll go on about that in a moment. Role function, same mindset as the lead one. So extroverted judging function. And so this can actually switch to this quite easily. Now, because it's FE, this is going to make this particular type pattern more likely to switch to the role function than other types. The FE DOMs will do this. Why? Because they are focused on other people. And if other people want to go into TE mode, say in a work situation, then they'll switch to that in order to suit other people in the social context. So this function will get a lot of development. So you get a lot of practice and you'll get better at it, but it's not preferred. You might even get burnout if it's used too much. So when the task at hand doesn't fit these two, so say they're in a work situation where FE and NE are not really much needed, or and they can't do the NETE thing, which is like doing ENTP-ish. So in one of these, because this is decreasing energy, then they might be in this work situation where these are not appropriate, and then it goes to this mode. And look at the type that's in here, TESE. That is the social mission block of ESTJ. So, and you'll see that come through in this description of TE. Motivated to achieve specific outcome, but loses motivation after the achievement.
Yes, Faye. Come on, Faye. This is blessed delay. Right, we'll write something then.
Oh, big delay. I wanted to ask if you have like a concrete, maybe even real life example of an ENFJ. I know, of an ENFJ switching to TE.
Well, maybe we could say Megan Novota uses a lot of TE in her typology businesses, shall we say. She has to use TE in that area. And also I would say also that you I don't think I mentioned it in this video because I haven't thought of it then. There's complementarity between the Kersey roles that these functions correspond to. So for example, according to Kersey, ENFJ is best at performing the teacher role. Now Kersey has ENTP best at performing the inventor role, but that doesn't fit this situation. But we all know ENTPs are good debaters. They're very good communicators. So I'm going to say that ENTP is the best at debating. And I think, and then we've got ESTJ supervising, and then you've got ESFP performing. And I could say that it's very useful for a teacher to be able to debate, persuade the pupils, to be able to supervise them, and to be able to perform and hold their attention. Because I remember Sabrina once saying that the artisan kids did well in a class when they had an ESFP teacher, and the ESFP teacher said that it had to be interesting to him in order to make it interesting to the pupils. And so you can see that there's something interesting going on there where these roles seem to be complementary. So that said, I could imagine that the type of roles that ENFJs get into, they might then, because usually involving people, they might end up then, because they are an in-charge type, they are an initiator, that they might then end up supervising people. But generally, I would say Megan would be an example of somebody using TE. Like, and if you're like leading a movement or something, you then start getting into the logistics of it. You could even say that Tamara's doing that. I mean, Tamara has sort of affectionately called Tamsy. She INFJ, but she raises her energy level to sort of like put herself into a sort of a mentor role when she's doing her and she sort of moved forward and sort of like for years where she was doing stuff and helping people for free, it's now and getting burnt out. It's now she's sort of like turning it into a business, and she's a single mother with 2 children, so it's like, you know, she has to live. So she's now enabling, teaching people how to create their own businesses and things like that, all in sort of idealist language. So it's like almost like TE for idealists. And I think you've seen her page. You've seen her page. So you recently saw Tamara's page. So maybe that would be an example of TE being used by an NFJ. Hey, that's a bit cheeky.
Okay.
I saw a cheeky comment here. The thumbnail brought me here. I feel betrayed. How dare you, sir? That's the same person. Right there.
Who?
There you go. There she is. There she looks nice. These people. Right. So, so yeah, I mean, I don't know how closely have you looked at Tamara's group or that page that I linked you to a few days ago?
I looked at it. I think I looked at it once or twice.
Right. Okay. So not really long enough to get a sort of read on how she uses.
Not a deep dive yet. Yeah.
But you can see what I mean, like so you can see with her that she's sort of using TE for NF aims, and that's like, I can give you another example. So just generally, Carol Linden, she has the business effectivewithpeople.com, and so that's diplomatic intellect, that's mentoring people. Even though she's got ENFJ preferences, no ENFP preferences. She can still do the mentoring roles and communicating with people. In fact, communicating is more informing, so that's more of so that's good for ENFP. ENFP, good communicators. And in her case, so you can see her using TE in her business for humanitarian idealist aims. And before then, though, she'd be an example of sort of atypical development and the importance of non-type factors. Her mother being ISTJ really got trained up in TE, and she worked at like a software company organizing the documentation, and did that for years. And then she's actually the editor of the Bulletin for Psychological Type. So you got an ENFP and an example with her, and an ENFP with really strong TE, but wanting to use TE for those humanitarian, those NF's aims. So it's like, it's got to be for a purpose. There's got to be like a feeling of, this is like maybe something that's going to make a difference in people's lives, rather than just pushing paper. Like an ENFP accountant, that's going to be tricky. There's not going to be much joy in that for the ENFP.
No.
All right. Is it okay if I press play? Right, here we go.
Okay, that doesn't sound ESTJ, but this bit is. Enjoys overcoming obstacles.
Wait a minute, what bit doesn't sound ESTJ?
Achieves
Let's play that
specific
back.
outcome, but loses motivation after the achievement. Okay, that doesn't sound ESTJ, but this bit is. Enjoys overcoming obstacles. Well, it's after the next bit. Enjoys overcoming obstacles. I think there's a little bit of SE coming in there for the enjoys overcoming obstacles. Next one, this final bullet point here, good manager. ESTJ, the manager. I've done a video with Jeff on ESTJ. If you search for, just use the search book on my channel for ESTJ, I think there's a pretty good video where we show the difference between an ESTJ's preference and their behavior. So, for example, Lieutenant Algiadello knows from experience to give his young detectives their head, but when they sort of get stuck, then he goes to the by-the-book methods, so to his natural preference. So, SE+. Now, this is the key to the type. They have very low energy for this extroverted sensing stuff, but it is very, very sensitive. So you will see here, oh yeah, I forgot to mention something about this type. This is an in-charge type. So in Kersey terms, this is the diplomatic initiator. So this is the in-charge interaction style among the NFs. And their in-charge interaction style will come into play in a moment when this function is hit. So what we got here, can't stand coercion and rough treatment, both of itself and its allies. Right, so when it's standing up to oppression, then it's going to start getting directive and in charge. Takes action to protest against any violence and oppression. Vengeance and righting wrongs propel its social activity. This is SE+, this is power sensing of resistance rather than subordination. The SDP is about subordination, a little bit cliche, but there you go. And ESFP is about resistance. And this has the same kind of extroverted sensing as ESFP. In fact, when it's stimulated in a beneficiary shift, it goes SE to FE, which is the social mission block of the ESFP. Now, oh yes, and this is very similar. This is very similar to the character of Rog Blake in Blake 7. You type in Blake 7 in the search blocks, you'll find 65 reviews of it. Avon, INTJ, said to...
Wait a minute, Faye, what's funny? Is it me working Blake 7 in again? Well, while I cope with that delay, I'm just going to put in this ENFJ playlist. That's an awkward delay, isn't it, folks?
No, it was the ESTP shade.
What did I say about ESTPs? Okay, yeah. Right then. Well, I'll play it on
subordination.
Hey, that's the Invictus system, you know. That's what it is. It is what it is. That's in the system. I'm not editorializing on that one.
You're not wrong.
And if you see Kersey's profile, it's like he talks about being great guys, and it's like, oh, con man. Right, here we go. I'll just back it up a little bit. Right, here we go. You type in Blake 7 in the search blocks, you'll find 65 reviews of it. Avon, INTJ, said to NeTx, said to Blake, well, he said about Blake, Blake is an idealist. He cannot afford to think. Right, self-affirmation block. This comes into play when the type is on its territory. So that will become clear. So maximum energy and optimum energy. This will become clear when I read through these bullet points about what that means. So anticipates trouble and prepares. So that's going to be like an INTJ. And it's also like the Kersey INTJ, which is contingency planning, looking where things can go wrong. Okay, so if A happens, what do we do? And if B happens and C happens, all these things that go wrong,
planning for those eventualities. Warns others of impending danger. Withdraws to reflect on meaning of life and past and future. So you can see the NI coming into play there. Now with TI plus, this is the social mission block of NITX, social mission block of INTJ, powerful unconscious TI in INTJ. Present them with an argument and they will...
Sorry about that, folks. I should not have said unconscious for TI in INT. Don't know what I was thinking. None of the functions are unconscious. Right.
Find the logical inconsistency in it, INTJ. They're good at finding and destroying people's arguments if they're slightly faulty. Unsure of logical validity of its arguments. However, frequently logic or maths attracts it. Ability to compose elegant and conclusive statements makes it successful in speculation and debate. And then you've got the FE working with the TI there. Expressiveness and logical consistency. So now we're on the inflation. So this is strong on its territory, very narrow set of circumstances. So these have wide scope of views. These have narrow scope of views. So you can see how these functions here, it's pretty much dependent when this type is introvert and the NI comes into play. Also probably a bit with the FE in when it's mentoring somebody or a group of people, it can see how they should change. And that's the problem right there. From my point of view, the should change. So the directing people. This, along with INFJ, so NIFX and FENX are the only directive feeling types. And that's because of the NI and the SE. Well, really it's because of the NI, because it sees how people should develop, in their opinion. It's a mentor. So Cozy calls this mentor educator or teacher. It calls INFJ mentor counselor. So counseling someone one-on-one. So Sana has said that she can see, as an IFX resembler, she can see how somebody needs to develop and knows when to push them in that direction and how much to push. Right, SI minor. So they're doing all this stuff. Achievement, ambitious for others and ambitious through themselves, through others, leading a movement, because, you know, it brings perks. And whilst they're focused on this SI-NI thing, they, just like ENTJ, because they're also breaking this position, may forget to eat and rest due to promising work projects. It's because they're so excited about it, about the possibility. They're not really present in their body, not like the internal sensor, internal body sensor. Can become hypochondriacal. Aims to project a specific, well-thought-out image. Right, so if you think about 2-wing 3, ENFJ. So that's that 3-wing, the theme. They always want to predict the Enneagram type 3. Or if you think of an E3 fix. FI plus in the control position. So that's the weakest function, the break, and it gets a bit of a build-up because of these other functions.
Right then, so Faye asked me to elaborate on unconscious for, okay, so Jung didn't actually write that. He wrote that in neurosis, the inferior function can partially lapse into the unconscious. And so that's why Marie-Louise von Franz thought the inferior function was very important for connections with pathologies. So, for example, we can see how certain NI DOMs can have suggestible extroverted sensing, or extroverted instinctiveness, I call it, that might come out in a pathological way in their romantic relationships. Alpha quadra bias. And you could also say the same thing with SE DOMs with NI. With gambling. Maybe the gambling aspect. Someone could say with TI DOMs that their FE there can be open towards manipulation. It's like, calm down, TI DOM. All she did was smile at you. So it's like, you could say that. But okay, so Vanderhoop then had this this idea about consciousness. So I've partly used this, I've adapted this idea in Model V of the club and the counter club. Van der Hoop had it as the nucleus and the counter nucleus. So you have the nucleus of your club functions. So for somebody like me, Van der Hoop, when he did his rings model of INTP, it would have, so he would think that for most introverts of thinking type with subsidiary intuition, that's how I described the type, snappy, is that he would have all of the NT functions conscious. And then in some of those people, is there going to be a counter nucleus? So that would be the SF functions, and that would be a counter nucleus in the field of conscious orientation. So what I would say from a modern point of view is that NTs are aware of their club functions, like INTPs have got like this TE in the back of their heads. Like you got INTPs working with computers, you've got INTPs working in science. They know TE. It's just they find it boring. They are aware of it. And I would say that over time, I could have muted Faye there. I've got the power. I can do that. Is that over time, I think there is greater awareness around those SF functions. So it's almost like if you could look back, an NTP looking back on their younger self, where it's like, oh, it was just like things that they didn't notice, that they were oblivious to certain things. So I would say it's degrees of consciousness with the counter nucleus, the counter club. So it takes, so the counter club for NFs, STs. Now, what there is going to be, though, is, and this was a good point that Megan Lavota raised, is that because NFs have to go to school, because all the feeling types have to go to school, they're going to develop their thinking functions more. Like if they taught feely stuff at school as much, right, then they would be forced to develop their feely side more. So it depends on what society values. I mean, you could have a society that really values that feely stuff and then like force feeding it to the INTJs. That would make them. I wonder what it's like for INTJs in Italy. A much more FE culture. All right. Any comments, Faye?
Yeah, well, my friend's boyfriend is an INTJ, and he has an FE Dom mom and grew up with like a bunch of sisters. And he is like one of the sweetest, like most pleasant people, never even mind NTs that I've talked to. So environment influences expression a lot, I think.
Yeah. And I'll remind people
I've also
about,
worked really hard. Oh yeah. I've also worked really hard on my TI because I used to speak so flowery and so universally true that I would get, let's say, constructive feedback for it in school constantly, even in my more NF classes. Like I would be criticized for not having SE examples or like TI reasoning. And then like in settings like group therapy, for example, they were like, can you, even bringing in the FI, like, can you personalize that more? So I really pushed on that, almost to the point of like doing a bit of, to use like Enneagram 9 language, like doing a bit of self-abandonment. So I feel like my journey now is finding my way back to me because I've stretched myself out really far. And I feel like if I'm not careful, I could keep going and then end up a little bit more fractured than I intended. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Something that, when you mentioned the 9, something I once mentioned to Megan Lavota about a sort of a meta TI. Okay. Sort of like a TI that's aware of its own limitations. So it's like you get a lot of INTPs who write things like, critique of pure reason. And Megan mentioned something like that some FE DOMs can have sort of meta FE, where it's like it's become so nuanced and aware of its own limitations of a function. Now, this is also going to correlate to the person being mature in the use and not overindulging the function. I would say. There's an interesting comment here. Oh, it's not gone away. I'm going to have to make an adjustment because of the... you could just about see it if I go there.
Yeah.
I would say that's a specific aspect, if not subfunction, of FE. And I can give an example of this. Right, so experience is massive. So you could have somebody who is the best body language. You could have somebody who is very good at reading body language in general. But are they as good as you at reading the body language of a person that you know really well, and you know all of their tells, and you've got a sort of a calibration in your mind of when they do a particular thing of, oh, you do that thing when they're feeling this, because there's this huge track record of the thing that they do when they feel a particular emotion. And so that experience, so because for ages I was not happy with the definition in NLP of calibration, because I was like I was being really pedantic in INTP about it. Okay, how is that like calibration? What is the standard they are comparing it to? And then eventually I realized what the standard is. It's like if you calibrated a person, it's your whole memory and experience of this person, of what they do in different various states. That is what you are calibrating them to. That's the thing. So I know when Jonathan goes like this, oh, he wants to speak. Whereas somebody else upon first meeting might think he's got hiccups.
Yeah.
So it's like picking up people's tells. So, and like I say, it's that ability gets filed under a subfunction of FE, and or rather FJs, or FE ego, FE home types as I call them, tend to be good at these things because of their focus on other people's attention. But I would also argue that all NFs are good. It depends how much the person cares. Like, I mean, and NTs might do that with people they care about, then they care about those things. If they don't care, it's like, eh. It's not even bothering. It's focus of attention and practice. Right, that's good. Any comments, Faye? So what she has any? I'll pause it.
Continue.
Okay. Right. Thank you. Directive. Control position. Like the SE has a lot of information, but not much energy for it. So ENFJ. Now I'm going to say what's in this box, which is sort of a summary of Dr. G's profile. I have the full one done. The full one has been done in the coconut shell video. Yes, monitors relationships closely in its circle, because this is ethics of relations. This is, and it does that through the subjective sense of rapport, bonding, recognition. But with this type, it's going more off the emotions that are being given off from the other person rather than its own subjective feelings about the other person. So this, takes precedence over this. It's not so much, it's ignored on an action level, but not on an informational level. This just overrides the FE. Possessive. Well, that's what it's written. While making strong statements about right and wrong, will not necessarily practice what he preaches, or it preaches. Right, so yeah, because you've got the mission, you've got the project, you've got the movement, and sometimes some things have to be done which are politically expedient in order to achieve the goal that they see. Achieve the goal, NFJ beta quadra. So sometimes these that was interesting. What made you perk up there, Faye? Something tickled your fancy in the video? I'm curious. Right. If you want to do.
I lost my train of thought. I forget something about oh, I think I may have laughed when you said directive.
Thank you. All right. Right, I'll just because I want to emphasize this for people. So I'm going to be honest about, because like there's lots of good ideas in Socionics, and Victor Galenko has loads of good ideas. So one of the best ones being the romance styles stuff. Really good way to tell the difference between NFPs and NFJs, beta NFs and delta NFs. So now I would argue, now Socionics thinks that relations are done by FI, but I would say, hang on a minute, look, you can do relations based on manners and facial expressions and body language, right? That's empirical. It's like, well, you do it like this. That's not what you do in that situation. It's not the done thing, right? That's FE.
I think
or you could say like a particular climate.
Yeah. I think that like relations in socionics, maybe it's not like.
Oh, what I'm saying is I don't just go with what I go outside of.
Yeah, I was thinking less about the
it's
process of like having a relationship and more like.
Yeah. I'll just say for the audience, like I stand out. I'm not a shill for Socionics. I will say when Socionics says it's right, and I'm going to say out, and I'm going to say it's the truth. I don't care if Socionics does it. This is the truth. We know that you can do relations via these two ways, because we know that people talk about the done thing and courtesy and all the things like that, and you can actually talk about how, say, there's things in society that used to be acceptable that are not acceptable now. Even say 10 years ago, where there's been changes. And those things, those empirical things, affect relations between people. Especially, you could say, the relations between men and women are going to be affected by these empirical things, like this sort of like these movements that have cropped up. And then people are going to react. Then there's going to be reactions to that. Yes, here we go. That's interesting that you're on there. I like that. We're using all the features. So what I'm sort of saying is, I don't just stay within Socionics. What I'm saying is, Socionics seems to put all of relations under FI, and I disagree. I say yes, you can do relationships via FI, especially close relationships, where the subjective sense of connection and psychological distance. And I would say for close relationships, that FI is very important. For other kinds of relationships, what is the done thing? How do you do this? Like the manners and things, even things like in workplace environment relations. What is the appropriate thing? You can't say that thing to her in that situation. All of those things to do with that's all FE stuff. That's all protocol stuff. Relations are people going on courses for things. They'll go on a course. This is what you can say. This is what you can't say. Or do they make them go on a re-education course? Then you got the extroverted. You got the empirical ethics there. It's like there was a comic strip episode, and it had James Bond, and it had like the 1960s sexist version of James Bond, and he went to a re-education center, and there was a clip, and the person giving this slide says, "This is a modern woman. She has needs." And then the Sean Connery Bond said, "I know what she needs." So it's, but that would be an example of sort of extroverted ethics, comedic sense. But like I said, I mean, there's loads of ethics of relation things out there of what is and is not appropriate. Look at YouTube, Facebook. People have all of these things in their mind about, especially as YouTubers, things you can talk about, things you, right? So there's definitely FE stuff going on, and the focus of attention of FJ is it's like you'll say, especially when they're older, it's not the done thing. That's what you'll get, especially from it's not the done thing. But I would say at closer distance, where it's not get the old manual out. This is the book of manners and courtesy. And there used to be a lot more. If you watch, say, are you one of these NFJs that's been watching, are you one of these NFs that's been watching The Crown or anything with aristocrats in?
Not really. That runs pretty counter to my politics. So, but
okay,
my stepdad was watching it, so I've seen some episodes. I did watch Bridgerton.
But
yeah,
I was just going to say that I was bringing up sort of extreme examples of relationships with people that are organized around protocol and manners. In like, it also is something with like, say, Jane Austen, some 19th century things where it's like loads of FE, and it's like, how can you not say that FE is involved in relations like that? It's a huge part of it. But I would say it's at your closer distance. It's then is your FI. Then it's like judging of connection and all of these other things. Now, so yeah, there's two different ways of skinning a cat. And I would also say that the thing that Carl Jung concentrated on, which was, now when he described it as extroverted and introverted, he meant empirical. And when he meant introvert, he meant subjective, because in his actual definitions, he mentions subjective, and by objective, he meant empirical. Problem with objective, it's got like 3 different meanings. But like objective can mean impartial. Objective can mean really, really, really true. Like 2 + 2 = 4. All the TI is not objective. Really, really good TI is objective, but not all TI is objective. And an objective can also mean objective data, empirical. But what Jung meant was empirical.
So
and what is empirical are, these are the manners, these are the done thing. This is like the social conventions. This is empirically there. It's in books or whatever, and it's like the done thing. For like people who like concentrate on it, it's there. The facial expressions are there. It's empirically there across all cultures. The same facial expressions denoting the same things is empirically there. But then you've got the subjective factor. And the same thing with sensor. Can TE be wrong there? Yeah, it can, because people can believe in stuff that's nonsense, like Keynesianism. Or believe in dodgy theories that don't work. Yeah, they can. They can, because people can believe in a scientific theory that's later proved wrong. Yeah, TE can be wrong if people believe in, because it's just that's the thing. That's why we don't want to call it objective. It's just empirical. It's just what everyone believes. It's just what the consensus thinking is. Yeah. But you see, the thing is though, TI, like, I mean, look at all the people in typology using TI, and then people saying stuff that's a little bit silly but internally consistent. You know, it's subjective thinking. It's creative, but it, you know, it can be wrong. It's just sort of like, so, are you all right, Faye, if I play a little bit more, or have you got some more comments?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a yes. Right. Oh, hang on a moment. What's all this about? Collective. When did I bring up collective? Was I talking about FE? Oh, but that does bring me up to a point that I'd like to make. Yes. Oh, instead of empirical, right. That brings me to a point, yes. There's an interesting little nuance with, say, NFPs, where I think tri-type has quite a lot to do with it. Oh, no, I said that word. Copyright, Catherine Favre. CatherineFavre.com. She invented it in the mid-90s. Catherine Favre owns tri-type. All that clear. Trademark. But with Enneagram, so for example, if someone's like a thin, so accommodator idealist, so E.I.E, or INFP in Kersey Bones and Nardi. So, and there are 4, they're going to be a little bit more independent and do things a little bit more their own way, but they still want consensus. They seem to still want consensus. Guardians want compliance. This is how you do it. You should do it like this. NFs tend to want consensus, and they're not all of them are like that, because, but interestingly enough, I think if you see on my channel, I did a video with RDub. That's Rachel, and then with a surname beginning with W, with RDub, where she talks about being a libertarian, but then she and it's like when she thought she was like ENTJ, and it's like all of the reasons for being libertarian that she was talking about were like idealist reasons, like a sense of community and things like that. And I said, this is very interesting. But usually there's more, so it's like, so there can be like, again, it's themes. There's themes of like, because even in socionics they call it Delta Quadra collectivist, don't they, Faye? So I don't wish to overjet, but there is a theme there of where you would look at it and you would go, well, they're FI, but there's a tendency to be collective, but they're not like Guardians, where Guardians are like collectivist. You get these tensions. So I've been doing some research by asking. So what I've been doing is showing a few INFPs, resemblers, a dichotomy in Kersey called utilitarian versus cooperative, or as Behrens would call it, affiliative versus pragmatic. Now, all of the Guardians would pick, pretty much all the Guardians would pick affiliative, especially the SFJs. But I suppose what it would be is like, you'd have to sort of follow up with the NFs. There's certain situations where they're going to do things their own. I suppose it's like they're less, I would say NFs are less utilitarian. But they will also do things their own way, because that's the thing about idealists. All idealists have got FI. And if it clashes with their individual values, they're going to do it their own way. But by default, NTs and SPs want to do things their own way. Even if they know that the book is like better, they still want to do it their own way, because that is just arrogance in that way, and it's just stupid. It's just easier to read the instructions. But and maybe there's a difference there with male NTs and SP. Maybe the male NTs are more likely to like not read the book. Maybe a little bit of arrogance comes in there. So, any comments, Faye?
No, continue.
There we go.
Ethics associated with FI get pushed into the background. So I think sometimes this is what he preaches, or it preaches. So this, takes precedence over this. It's not so much, it's ignored on an action level, but not on an informational level. This just overrides the FE. Possessive. Well, that's what it's written. While making strong statements about right and wrong, will not necessarily practice what he preaches, or it preaches. Right, so, yeah, because you've got the mission. You've got the project, you've got the movement, and sometimes some things have to be done which are politically expedient in order to achieve the goal that they seek. Achieve the goal, NFJ beta quadra. So sometimes these ethics associated with FI get pushed into the background. So I think that is about it. This is also called ignoring function in modulators. I think that is about it. And hopefully this has been quick enough for people. And if you want the longer one, I will link it at the end, in the end screen, and I will link it below.
Yeah, the longer one should be in the playlist, and I'm going to link that here. Hang on a moment. It should be right there. Oh, right. This one's, yeah, I'll put that there. Right, so this will be the link to, that's going to be the link to the longer one. That one's quite elaborate, the longer one. So then, Faye, Q&A me. We've got to work around this delay.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to say that everything that you touched on, even if, yeah, the lag, everything you touched on was definitely super true for me, even if it was more of like a, not as much of a deep dive. It checked all the boxes. Yeah, I will definitely go over your longer in-depth video. I think what I really like about Model V is that, like, as far as a complex system like SOCIONICS goes, it's really like intuitive / instinctual. It clicks and it makes sense, because I love Model A, don't get me wrong, but it can sometimes get a bit tiring trying to type people and track people by going like, okay, is this 6th or 7th? Like, what is the chronological order from top to bottom? What's going on? And then I like the idea, by contrast, of having like these club functions, because yeah, like my FI does feel attached to my FE and my NE does feel attached to my NI, and having that be kind of like the leading rocket ship on my way forward makes total sense.
Yeah, and it also it also correlates to the idea of, so Kersey would have, so for INFP, FI and X, And Kersey's got this whole theory of various roles. He would say for FI and X, the role for that type to enact would be a role that is reserved and informing. And so the role of reconciler of alienates, reconciler of conflicts, and he called that role the healer. So like someone who's working for marriage, used to call it marriage guidance. I forgot what they call it. Relationship counselor. Not a directive role, an understanding role, diplomatic. They would be good at that role. There's a role which is like that are then further away, but they can still do. If it's a champion, a little bit more expressive, okay, so it requires a little bit more energy for INFP, a little bit more outside their comfort zone, but it's still within the diplomatic intellect. Counselor, working one-on-one, have to be a little bit more directive, even so the role is directive, even though their nature is informing. So again, it requires a little bit of a stretch, just a little bit of a stretch. But then for teacher, they can do teacher, but it requires them to be directive and expressive. Right. So it might tire them out a bit, but they can still do them all within that diplomatic intellect of those 4 roles: mentoring and mediating.
Like, question: what do you think an ENFJ, in your opinion, like what role in society or just in relationships do we take that feels like breathing to us? What have you observed?
It's that kind of teacher role. It's just end up leading stuff, especially with regard to it's like you could say with Tamsi, like there's an example of someone's type who's different from their role. When you see her, she's doing this expressive role that is better suited towards ENFJ because they have more energy for that. It's like there's a lineup between someone's predisposition and then the role. So it's like the type and the role fits each other like a glove.
Yeah, that's interesting because I think I have a lot less energy than most ENFJs. Like, what about
for people stuff though?
I have energy for it, but it still comes across like a lot more gentle and subdued than I think a lot of ENFJs. I have episodes of vivacity, in which like I'm excitable or something, and it kind of looks more like the ring of benefit, like ESFP. But like for the most part, I'm pretty aside from the fact that I'm telling people what to do, there's still that directiveness there. Like I'm not doing things that require a lot of like TE and SI commitment because I would just rather kind of respond, like be a teacher in the moment than have like excessive structure, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm gonna try and find the the graphic in Personology that sort of gives the roles for ENFJ.
Sure.
Right. Going in tell the audience what I'm doing. I'm going in the Kersey folder, then the Personology folder, profiles, idealists, initiator idealist, preview. Right. So as luck would have it, I have this. So let's go back over here. It's on a different file. So this is Kersey's guess at. So I used to call this type the diplomatic initiator, but you see, to me that's too much about the intellect, like diplomatic enabling. You want to separate as much as possible the type from the role, because a lot of people confuse Kersey types with the roles and therefore say, oh, Kersey's just about stereotypes. is just about people just doing these roles. No, he's not. He's got a
Right.
theory of it's like almost like a human resources theory of this kind of person fits this kind of role. And so if you're talking about the actual type, it should be the initiator idealist, because the initiator is in charge. That's the interaction style, and the idealist is a temperament. The so it's just their intellect.
Right.
So that intellect's in green, the diplomatic enabler, and because the type is naturally directive, they can fit a directive diplomatic enabling role very easily. It's not that much of a stretch, and they have to sort of hold themselves maybe back. So Kristen has said that she has to hold herself back from telling people what to do. She's like ESTJ, like, so it's like she has to like stop herself.
Yeah.
From like naturally wanting to supervise them. And then Kersey would say, go on.
I've learned to use FI to disguise my directiveness. So I'll kind of stop myself right before I tell someone what to do and say, well, I mean, you can totally do whatever you want, but this is what I would do in this situation and why, and maybe that'll resonate for you. And usually that clicks in people's heads somehow. They're like,
right.
well, yeah, because they feel like they can kind of personally identify with it somehow. It even works on FI Polar, even more, I would say.
Ooh.
Which is fascinating. Yeah.
All right, then. So I asked about, so these are going to develop though, like, and the upbringing can change this rather a lot. And this is, like I said, a guess where you can have like certain NFs who have got these roles higher than these roles. It just depends on their sort of upbringing. And you can have certain NFs with, say, more towards, say, because there are a lot of artistic NFs. So it also depends how far away they are in terms of. So, for example, if you bring in intertype relations as well, then you can get certain differences. So, for example, reconciler and then the role of the promoter. Well, that's con man. Kind of very hard for like E.I.E to enact the role of con man or con artist. Very difficult to be like expedient like that and infinitely flexible with no principles. So that is a role that's sort of a promoter of schemes. Very hard for, and this is why I talk about the double conflictor. This is where someone is a conflictor in socionics and their predisposed roles are opposite. So the double conflictors would be, I'll make a list, because other relations within the conflict, you get some mirage ones. So opposites in Kersey. Okay, if I do, okay. Actually, I've got the graphic for it. I might as well show the graphic rather than mentally go through. Okay, so we've got personology. It's probably going to be miscellaneous. Probably a photograph. Probably Vivicam. Is it this one? Yes. Just by chance. Right. Because I remember writing all these out. So my opinion in the audience, get some feedback from the audience on this. So I believe that these people conflict more than the other ones. So I'll give you the types. Right. So these are the, right. So I think that ESTPs and INFPs conflict more than say INTP and ESFP, because ESFP is not trying to control INTP. They're both informing and they're both utilitarian. Whereas ESTP and INFP, ESTP is directive and utilitarian. So directive and want to do it their own way. And INFP is informing and cooperative. And so there's differences there. And then, so I think they conflict more. I think arrangers and suppliers. So that would be ILI and ESE. So their predisposed roles are opposite in Kersey. So maybe they conflict. So my prediction is that these four pairs will conflict more in socionics. I call these four double conflictors. So ENTJs and ISFJ, ESTP and INFP, EII, ILI and ESE, and then this one and this one. Now, interestingly enough, and this is one of my 6 lines of reasoning for why socionics sometimes might have LSI and SLI the wrong way around. I suggest people go out there, do their own research, and ask a lot of these MBTI, because nearly all MBTI ENFPs, now there's a little bit of a difference here with Faye, like if you've got ADHD and you might have ENFP preferences even though you're an ENFJ. But for most of them, nearly all MBTI ENFPs would also be classified as I.E.E. in socionics. Right, I think that's fair to say. Now, listen to those MBTI ENFPs and ask them what they think of ISTPs, of MBTI, like that. So that's going to be the same as Kersey Bones and Ozzy, ISTPs and ISTJs. They don't like ISTPs. You ask MBTI ISTPs, they do not like ENFPs. They really conflict. Now, the problem, though, is that socionics would say, well, actually, your ISTJ is LSI. And it's like, but you'd have to, then you've got type relations that don't work unless you're going to say, oh, and then you would have to say that those types that are ENFP and MBTI, then you then have to change them to EIEs in order to get it to work. But that's not going to be the case, because so there's other things it doesn't play out. There's so many anecdotal stories, like Carol Linden was at an event and somebody asked the audience to raise their hand about all the ENFPs that are married to ISTJs. And like 8 of them raised their hand. And like Carol said, she never saw the attraction because her mother was ISTJ. But there's a lot of... So you see what I mean? It's like, because an MBTI ISTJ can get classified as an LSI. Now, it might depend on the school of socionics, and I'm going to show people this because I've got the I can prove it to people. Sociotype, STs, LSI. Have I got it here? Yeah, I've got it here. Right, I'm going to show this. So now I think the Galenka LSI.
STPs.
Yeah, I know you do, and they're the ones that you like are the MBTI STPs, and so it's like this one though. Let's see if you're drooling over this one, because this is LSI and this reads like an ISTJ. Oh yeah, I remember. Oh, I don't know if I can say his name because it might have problems on YouTube. The leader of Germany in the early 1940s and most of the 1930s once said about the leader of Spain, name rhymes. It was called Generalissimo. Now this guy, this leader of Spain, I think he was ISTJ, and he would talk to this leader of Germany in the 1930s, who became to prominence in the 1940s. Well, he would like talk about lots of logistical stuff, and like he needs grain for Spain and all this kind of stuff. And the leader of Germany at the time said, I do not want to have another meeting with him. I'd rather have my teeth pulled. And I think that that may have been an example of ISTJ with ENFJ. Jonathan types that leader of Germany as ENFJ, and he went through a lot of evidence on it. Yes, disclaimer, there are bad exemplars of every type. There, right, but there was a point there of conflict. So are you hot for this stuff in red that reads like ISTJ? I mean, come on, that's ISTJ. Takes into account the laws, instructions, and established standards.
Yeah, it is. There's nothing careful about an STP.
I know, but this is LSI. But this is because Socionics does not take into account temperament. It does not take into account the instinct, and it sees it as structural.
That's why I don't. Yeah, that's why I don't type based on Socionics descriptions, because you could probably, like, I could see a lot of like E.I.E and ESI in myself, sometimes more than descriptive like E.I.E.
Yeah.
Unless you go with like the descriptions of the NI subtype, that's me when I'm dramatic, but you know.
I mean, like
there's
this one
a lot
here.
of.
Like.
Oh, I was gonna say there's Enneagram influence as well.
Yep. I mean, like here. I mean, lectures on moral standards. That doesn't sound like ISTP to me. And then maybe sometimes, but the coup de grace though is later on. Right, strong-minded forbearance.
It wouldn't be a lecture.
They have got a little bit.
It wouldn't be a lecture. It would more be like a rant.
Yeah. Every now and then, like they do, like there's every now and then a little bit. But here though,
and condemnation.
This doesn't sound like ISTP to me. Patient restraint and tolerance, and patient self-control.
No.
Yeah, this was translated by professional translator.
Like, what is this even based on? Or who, I should ask.
Because this is what Socionics does. It's typing ISTJs as LSI, but at least Victor does. But now here's the weird thing. You look at creative subtype of LSI, and it is ISTP AF, martial arts, car parts that it's working on. It's like all the stereotypes of like KBN. Yeah. IST. It is in there. It is in the book. I'll get it out. It is in here. It's in the book. If people want to get the book. So ISTJ LSI creative subtype. Right, artisan. Well, it's not an artisan. LSI. Okay, creative subtype 155. I'll just give people little bits, so they'll see how. Right, so here we go. So, creative subtype: firefighters, inventors who create complex mechanisms from improvised materials. That's like the crafter, the mechanic stereotype. Knowing how to improvise. They do all the introverts as she. She can become violent and aggressive, greatly immobilized in dire situations. Shows natural wit and ingenuity. So it's like when the pressure's on. This is like a complete artisan. Here we go. She may collect parts in her yard for original constructions and creations. This LSI ardently resists any attempt to subjugate her to any rules. She is pretty clever and cunning, resorting to little tricks as well as complex ones. So this So the creative subtype of LSI is how the whole type should be. It's what the whole type should be. Fierce defense.
Yeah.
Like you're reading, you're probably thinking, Ben, this sounds hot. This is the subtype for me. And it's like, but the other ones, it's like normalizing and dominant. It reads like an ISTJ. So that's another line of reasoning that I have for them being the wrong way around, is that the sensory introverts show the biggest difference among subtypes. I'm just going to put that under here. Oh, I'll put it under that one. Anyhow, so, but by default, it gets even more here. Look at all this. This does sound...
Wait, go back.
Oh, okay.
Okay. I wanted to say that I will kind of, I can see how in the manipulative slot that I have seen, you know, STPs, especially ISTPs, become irritable and explosive. And I personally perceive TI DOMs as stubborn. But that...
Yeah, we can be.
Yeah. So I think there's room for it. But I can also see how this can easily apply to Myers-Briggs ISTJ as well, and isn't exclusive to.
So what Jeff would say is
Myers-Briggs
ISTP younger brother, KBN MBTI. He would say, suggest it was their idea, because they want. If it's their idea, if they think it's their idea, they'll do it. Well, don't you remember you came up with that idea? Well, that's your idea. Do that kind of thing. Just like suggest it. Oh, that's a good idea. Like, or tell them something. And it's like, because they won't want to do it if it's somebody else's idea. It's a good point. ISTJs can be stubborn. Like, yeah, because they get stuck to the way it should be done by the book, sort of thing.
Yeah.
So, but if we go here, all of this stuff, this is very much like. This is not MBTI, Kersey Bowen's Nardi, ISTP. And it's very unlike that actual creative subtype. That creative subtype profile, there was a bit, I just remember now, very good in Dyer. Okay, so I'll just say here, so what we'll do is we'll finish off with this block. Again, avoids risks and rapid changes. But the creative subtype, firefighter, very good in a dire situation. So you see what I mean out there, folks? Like there's massive differences between subtypes.
How can you have a subtype? Yes.
It's completely different from the type. Yes.
It's diametrically opposed to the core type. Like, no.
I know. It's a workaround. You know, it's a workaround. So like I said, I'm going to give people some of my lines of reasoning for why I think LSI and SLI are the wrong way around. Right, so what we can do is, you can do that thing, folks. You can find out, you can ask people, ask people in the MBTI groups, ask your people who are ENFP and ISTP and ISTJ, retype them if you like in SOCIONICS, but honestly, and then see how the intertype relations play out to see if it's as predicted. You can also Farrah Mackenzie, when she was EEG, she had more activity in FP1 than FP2. All the rational types have more activity in FP1 than FP2 from the EEG data. But Farrah Mackenzie gets classified as SLI in SOCIONICS. I did a video on this. We went through EEG data, whereas I think she's like, just like Dario wrote the sort of 3 types for her. And it depends on sort of her natural type and how her brain has developed, because she was in her late 30s when she was EEG'd. And so based on the EEG for Dario said it was like ISTP, ISFP, INFJ. I think she leans towards ISTP. But she would, so the problem is that doesn't match. So that's incompatibility, because out of all of Dario's results, all of the rational types, so JE and JI DOMs, more activity in FP1 than FP2. So that would be out of pattern. That would be an inconsistency. The DCNH, as we said there, the fact that there is
ADHD would affect that. Do you think ADHD would affect that?
It might do. That's something we could ask Dario. That's something we can ask because he's
Actually, yeah. I know an ENFJ in the community that has ADHD, I think, who's done EEG, so I could ask them and let you know.
I'll just say I've something here I've written on my list. KBN ISTJ, MBTI ISTJ.
Mm-hmm.
They're FE polar. Their faces, their monotonal voice. It's like you're going to classify. So Socionics would classify these people who have this reduced affect display, who have a face like INTJ, and it's like, oh, you're going to classify them as LSI when they're actually fit a lot better, classic FE break. But because they're guardians, it's like they know the social conventions. It's just like it's just got a bit of that, boring. They talk like E.L. Wisty.
Right.
On did I show you that clip where he was on the park bench?
I don't think so.
Where he said something like, a whale isn't a fish, it's an insect. It's like, no, it was a joke. It's like that voice, that John Major, FE polar, boring kind of voice. You probably would be your conflictor. And it's like, and so if they get typed as LSI and Socionics says, oh yeah, but I find that really attractive. Like, John Major is my guy. No. So breaks temperament, Van der Hoop and Jung, because Jung wrote about the inferior nature of NE. The inferior NE looks at sort of like negative possibilities and whatnot.
Right. That's also going to be, to an extent, that's going to be anyone with like severe anxiety as well.
Yes.
Because my mom is NE polar, and she's still like, oh my god, like what if this happened? Because she just has like severe anxiety.
Oh yeah,
but it's not as like expansive.
Yeah. That's why Enneagram's so important, because it can, like, if you don't know Enneagram, you can get really confused when typing somebody.
Yes.
Especially if someone's a 6. Really, like Laura Miller will get classified as an SI Dom, but it's like because she's a self-pressed 6. And the example I give is that at work, she's by the book, because she once said in an interview like 4 or 5 times, I don't want to lose my job. And then, but at home, she does things her own way. So she's utilitarian at home and cooperative at work. So, right then. So I'd have to like go over that in future. But again, people can test out those intertype relations for themselves. Is find people in MBTI or in FP, type them in Socionics if you want, see if they're II, and then type the IST and see how the intertype relations come out. Honestly, do they play out? Because it does seem that the MBTI ENFPs like the MBTI ISTJs and don't like the ISTPs, and the MBTI ISTPs really do not like the ENFPs, because they think that they are, they think that they go all over the place and they can't think. That's what ISTPs think. They think ENFPs can't think. I'm not saying they're right. I'm just saying that that's pretty much how they view it. But the people in those groups are going to be younger, and so the ENFPs are going to be younger and probably a bit more TI polar, especially the. I would imagine that nearly all the IEEs that know Socionics are going to be less TI polar than the other ones, because they'll have to have enough TI to understand it. All right. Oh, that's popped up on screen. That shouldn't have popped up on screen. Look at that. How embarrassing that is. That's a share screen.
I was looking at it like, oh.
Yeah, the share screen saying, yeah, and talking about polar functions not being that bad. I mean, Faye knows when she needs to eat. Right, folks. So I'm going to end this broadcast. Is it all right if I end? Faye, I'm going to end now. Right.
Sure.